There is a question that few people ask aloud, yet it quietly shapes how millions experience their later years. It is not a question about disease or medication, though both have their place. It is a question about something more fundamental. What does it feel like to inhabit your own body as the decades pass? For many, the answer becomes increasingly muted over time. Sensations fade. Energy dims. The connection between mind and body, once so immediate it required no thought, gradually loosens. This drifting apart is so gradual that it can be happening for years before one notices. And because it happens quietly, because it is not discussed in polite company or measured in routine medical exams, it is easy to accept as simply what aging means. But what if this particular form of fading is not inevitable? What if the connection you once felt to your own physical self can be maintained, even deepened, across all the years of life? You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. The duration of life. Understanding how bodies change across decades. There is a question that becomes more interesting the longer we live. It is not the question of how to stop aging, because aging cannot be stopped. It is not the question of how to reverse time, because time moves in one direction. The question is simpler and more practical. What actually happens to human bodies as they move through their sixth, seventh, and eighth decades? And what can be learned from watching how different people experience these years? This inquiry has occupied researchers across multiple disciplines for generations. Gerontologists study the biology of aging. Epidemiologists track population patterns. Anthropologists observe how different cultures approach later life. What emerges from this collective work is not a single answer, but a set of observations. Patterns that appear consistently across different populations, different historical periods, and different individual circumstances. The human body in its later decades is not the same machine it was in youth. This statement is obvious, yet its implications are often misunderstood. The body does not simply wear out in a uniform way. It changes according to principles that can be understood and, to some extent, influenced. The changes are not random. They follow patterns that reflect both genetics and environment, both inevitable biological processes and modifiable lifestyle factors. What follows is an exploration of these patterns, drawn from decades of research across multiple scientific disciplines. The goal is not to provide a checklist of things to do or avoid. It is to offer a framework for understanding, a way of thinking about the later decades that might inform how one chooses to live within them. The architecture of aging. What changes and why? To understand aging, it helps to understand what is actually aging. The human body is not a single entity that grows old uniformly. It is a collection of systems, each with its own timeline, each influenced by different factors, each aging at its own rate. The cardiovascular system, for example, shows characteristic changes over time. Blood vessels gradually lose some of their elasticity. The heart muscle may thicken slightly. The maximum heart rate achievable during exertion declines in a predictable pattern. These changes are universal, but their rate varies considerably between individuals. Some people in their 80s have cardiovascular systems that function like those of people decades younger. Others experience accelerated changes that affect their quality of life. The musculoskeletal system follows its own trajectory. Bone density peaks in early adulthood, remains relatively stable for years, then begins a gradual decline. The rate of decline accelerates for women after menopause due to hormonal shifts. Muscle mass also peaks in young adulthood and gradually diminishes unless actively maintained. This process, called sarcopenia when it becomes clinically significant, affects strength, balance, and metabolic function. The nervous system shows perhaps the most complex pattern of aging. Some cognitive functions, particularly processing speed and certain types of memory, tend to decline with age. Others, including vocabulary and accumulated knowledge, often remain stable or even improve. The brain retains remarkable plasticity throughout life, meaning it can form new connections and adapt to changing circumstances. This capacity for adaptation is one of the most hopeful findings in modern neuroscience. The endocrine system orchestrates many of the changes associated with aging. Hormone levels shift across decades, sometimes gradually, sometimes dramatically. For women, the menopausal transition represents a major endocrine event with widespread effects throughout the body. For men, testosterone declines more gradually, but the effects are still significant. These hormonal changes influence everything from bone density to mood to tissue health. The immune system also changes with age. The term immunosenescence describes the gradual decline in immune function that makes older adults more susceptible to certain infections and less responsive to some vaccines. At the same time, the immune system may become more prone to inappropriate inflammation, contributing to chronic conditions that were less common in earlier decades. Understanding these multiple trajectories helps explain why aging looks so different from person to person. One individual might maintain excellent cardiovascular health while experiencing significant joint issues. Another might have sharp cognitive function while managing multiple chronic conditions. The body does not age uniformly because it is not a uniform system. The observation of extremes. What very old populations teach. Researchers have long been interested in populations where people live exceptionally long lives. These studies, while sometimes overinterpreted in popular media, offer genuine insights into the patterns of human longevity. The so-called blue zones, regions where people live longer than average, have been studied extensively. Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, Ikaria in Greece, the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, and the Seventh-day Adventist community in Loma Linda, California, all show patterns worth noting. What is interesting about these populations is not that they have discovered a secret that others have missed. It is that they demonstrate, through their collective experience, that certain patterns of living are compatible with very long life. Dietary patterns in these regions share some characteristics, but differ in specifics. The Okinawan diet is high in vegetables and sweet potatoes, low in meat and dairy. The Sardinian diet includes more animal products, particularly from sheep. The Adventist diet is often vegetarian or vegan. What these diets have in common is that they are largely plant-based, minimally processed, and consumed in moderate quantities. The specifics matter less than the overall pattern. Physical activity in these regions tends to be built into daily life rather than scheduled as exercise. People walk to destinations, work in gardens, perform manual tasks as part of their regular routines. This pattern of low-intensity movement throughout the day differs from the modern pattern of sitting for hours followed by concentrated exercise. Social connection appears consistently in studies of long-lived populations. People in these regions tend to remain integrated into family and community networks throughout life. They have social roles that continue into old age. They are not isolated from younger generations. This social integration correlates with better health outcomes across multiple measures. Purpose, sometimes called ikigai in Okinawa or plan de vida in Nicoya, emerges as another common element. People who live long often have reasons to get up in the morning. They feel needed or useful. They have responsibilities that continue into later life. This sense of purpose appears to matter independently of other factors. What these observations suggest is not that there is a single formula for longevity. It is that long life tends to emerge from a pattern of living that includes movement, moderate nutrition, social connection, and purpose. The specific expression of these elements varies across cultures, but the underlying principles recur. The biology of maintenance. How bodies respond to use. One of the most consistent findings in aging research is that biological systems respond to use. This principle operates at multiple levels, from individual cells to whole organ systems. At the cellular level, the concept of hormesis describes how low-level stressors can trigger beneficial adaptations. When cells are exposed to mild stress, they activate repair mechanisms that leave them stronger than before. This is why moderate exercise, which stresses cells temporarily, produces long-term benefits. The stress itself is not the benefit. The adaptation to the stress is the benefit. This principle applies across many domains. Caloric restriction, when moderate and controlled, triggers cellular pathways that enhance stress resistance. Intermittent fasting activates similar mechanisms. Exposure to cold or heat, within safe limits, can stimulate beneficial adaptations. The common thread is that biological systems strengthen in response to appropriate challenges and weaken in the absence of challenge. The cardiovascular system exemplifies this principle. Blood vessels that are regularly required to dilate and constrict maintain their elasticity better than vessels that remain at a constant diameter. The heart that is regularly challenged to pump harder during exercise maintains its capacity better than the heart that never faces increased demand. The system adapts to the demands placed upon it. The musculoskeletal system shows the same pattern. Bone responds to weight-bearing load by maintaining density. Muscle responds to resistance by maintaining mass and strength. Without these demands, both bone and muscle gradually diminish. This is not a failure of the system. It is an appropriate response to reduced requirements. The body conserves resources when demands are low. The nervous system also responds to use. Cognitive functions that are regularly exercised tend to be better preserved. This does not mean that crossword puzzles prevent dementia, a claim that research does not support. It means that the brain, like other organs, maintains what it uses. Neural pathways that are regularly activated remain strong. Pathways that are rarely used may weaken. The implications of this principle are straightforward but profound. The body in later decades will tend toward whatever state matches the demands placed upon it. If demands are low, function will decline to match those low demands. If demands are maintained, function will be maintained to the extent possible. This is not about reversing aging. It is about aligning the body's state with one's preferences for how to live. The question of hormones. Signaling systems across decades. Hormones are the body's chemical messengers, carrying signals between organs and orchestrating complex responses to internal and external conditions. Their levels and patterns change across the lifespan, and these changes influence nearly every aspect of health. The menopausal transition for women represents the most dramatic hormonal shift in adult life. Over a period of several years, estrogen production from the ovaries declines substantially. This decline affects tissues throughout the body, not just the reproductive system. Estrogen receptors are present in bone, blood vessels, brain, and other tissues. When estrogen levels drop, these tissues respond. The effects are well documented. Bone loss accelerates, increasing fracture risk. Blood vessels may become stiffer. Skin becomes thinner and less elastic. Vaginal tissues may become drier and more fragile. Some women experience hot flashes and sleep disruption. Others notice changes in mood or cognitive function. The experience varies widely, but the underlying hormonal shift is universal. Testosterone in women also declines with age, though more gradually than estrogen. Produced by the ovaries and adrenal glands, testosterone contributes to libido, energy, and sense of well-being. Its decline may contribute to the changes some women notice in these areas, though the relationship is complex and not fully understood. For men, testosterone declines more gradually across decades. This gradual decline, sometimes called andropause, lacks the clear boundary of female menopause but still produces noticeable effects in many men. Reduced libido, decreased muscle mass, increased body fat, and lowered energy can all accompany declining testosterone, though these changes also reflect other aging processes. The endocrine system does not operate in isolation. Hormones interact with each other and with other body systems. Stress hormones like cortisol affect reproductive hormones. Thyroid hormones influence metabolism and energy. Insulin regulates blood sugar and interacts with sex hormones. The system is interconnected, and changes in one part ripple through others. What research suggests about hormones and aging is that the relationship is bidirectional. Hormones affect how we age, but how we age also affects hormones. Physical activity influences hormone levels. Body composition matters. Sleep quality affects endocrine function. Stress management matters. These factors interact in ways that make it difficult to isolate cause and effect, but also create opportunities for influence. The medical approach to hormones in later life has evolved over decades. Systemic hormone therapy for women, once widely prescribed, is now used more selectively after research revealed both benefits and risks. Local hormone preparations, which deliver small amounts directly to specific tissues, offer options for addressing local effects with minimal systemic exposure. Testosterone therapy for men is available but requires careful monitoring. The decision to use any hormone therapy involves weighing individual circumstances, risks, and benefits. The matter of movement. Physical activity across the lifespan. Physical activity is perhaps the most studied lifestyle factor in aging research, and the evidence for its benefits is remarkably consistent. People who remain physically active into later decades show better outcomes across multiple measures of health and function. The types of activity that matter are multiple. Cardiovascular exercise, sometimes called aerobic exercise, strengthens the heart and lungs, improves circulation, and supports metabolic health. Walking, swimming, cycling, and dancing all qualify when done at an intensity that raises heart rate and breathing. The key is consistency rather than intensity. Regular moderate activity produces more benefit than occasional intense exertion. Strength training becomes increasingly important with age. Muscle mass naturally declines across decades, but this decline can be slowed and even partially reversed with resistance exercise. Lifting weights, using resistance bands, or performing bodyweight exercises like squats and push-ups signals the muscles that they are still needed. The body responds by maintaining muscle tissue to meet the demand. Balance training deserves attention because falls become more consequential with age. Activities that challenge balance, such as Tai Chi, yoga, or simply standing on one foot while brushing teeth, help maintain the neural pathways and muscle responses that prevent falls. The cost of a fall, in terms of injury and loss of independence, makes balance work a high-value investment of time. Flexibility and mobility work complete the picture. Maintaining range of motion in joints supports continued function in daily activities. Simple stretching, performed regularly, can preserve the ability to reach, bend, and move comfortably. This matters for quality of life even if it does not show up in standard health metrics. The pattern of activity may matter as much as the type. Research on sedentary behavior suggests that prolonged sitting has negative effects independent of exercise. Someone who exercises for 30 minutes daily but sits for the remaining 15.5 hours may not fully offset the effects of sitting. Breaking up sedentary time with brief movement appears beneficial. What makes physical activity effective is not any single property, but its cumulative effect on multiple systems. Movement stimulates blood flow, which delivers oxygen and nutrients to tissues. It challenges muscles and bones, triggering maintenance responses. It engages the cardiovascular system, preserving its capacity. It activates neural pathways, supporting coordination and balance. It can improve mood through the release of endorphins and other neurochemicals. The benefits are multiple because movement affects multiple systems. The practical question for individuals is not what optimal exercise looks like, but what sustainable movement looks like. Activities that are enjoyable enough to continue, accessible enough to perform regularly, and safe enough to avoid injury will produce more benefit than theoretically optimal activities that cannot be maintained. Walking with a friend, gardening, dancing to music at home, swimming at a local pool, all count. The body does not distinguish between formal exercise and informal movement. It responds to both. The question of nutrition. Fueling the aging body. Nutrition research in aging populations has produced both clear findings and persistent controversies. What emerges from the evidence is not a single optimal diet, but principles that can guide choices across different eating patterns. Caloric intake matters because energy requirements change with age. Metabolic rate declines gradually, meaning the same food intake that maintained weight at 50 may lead to weight gain at 70. At the same time, nutrient requirements do not decline correspondingly. The challenge is to obtain adequate nutrition from fewer calories, which increases the importance of nutrient density. Protein deserves special attention because of its role in maintaining muscle mass. Research suggests that older adults may benefit from slightly higher protein intake than younger adults, particularly when combined with physical activity. The timing of protein intake may also matter, with distribution across meals appearing more effective than concentrating protein in a single meal. Fruits and vegetables appear consistently in research on healthy aging. Their benefits likely come from multiple factors: fiber for digestive health and blood sugar regulation, vitamins and minerals for various metabolic functions, and phytochemicals that may influence inflammation and other processes. The specific types may matter less than the overall quantity and variety. Fat quality influences cardiovascular health and inflammation. Unsaturated fats from plant sources, fish, and some animal products appear beneficial when they replace saturated fats and processed oils. The traditional Mediterranean pattern, with its emphasis on olive oil, nuts, and fish, exemplifies this approach. Carbohydrate quality affects blood sugar regulation and energy. Whole grains, legumes, and vegetables provide carbohydrates packaged with fiber that slows absorption. Refined carbohydrates and sugars enter the bloodstream more quickly, challenging blood sugar control. For older adults, maintaining stable blood sugar supports energy, mood, and metabolic health. Hydration deserves mention because the sensation of thirst diminishes with age. Older adults may become dehydrated without feeling thirsty. Adequate fluid intake supports all bodily systems, from circulation to digestion to cognitive function. Water, herbal teas, and other low-calorie fluids all contribute. Dietary patterns observed in long-lived populations share characteristics worth noting. They tend to be plant-forward without being strictly vegetarian. They include fish in many cases, but not necessarily daily. They feature minimally processed foods rather than industrial products. They are consumed in social contexts rather than alone. They are enjoyed without guilt, but also without excess. The translation of these observations into individual practice depends on personal circumstances, preferences, and health status. Someone with diabetes will have different nutritional priorities than someone with kidney disease. Someone with chewing difficulties will need different food textures than someone with full dentition. The principles provide guidance, but their application must be individualized. The social dimension, connection and longevity. The relationship between social connection and health outcomes is one of the most consistently replicated findings in population research. People with stronger social ties tend to live longer and healthier lives than those who are isolated. This finding holds across cultures and after controlling for other variables. The mechanisms linking social connection to health are multiple. Social support can buffer stress, reducing the physiological wear and tear associated with chronic stress activation. People with social ties may have more encouragement to maintain healthy behaviors. They may receive practical help with medical care or daily tasks. They may simply have more reasons to engage with life, which itself appears beneficial. The quality of relationships matters alongside quantity. A few close, supportive connections may provide more benefit than many superficial ones. Relationships characterized by conflict or strain may not confer the same benefits and might even be detrimental. The research suggests that feeling connected matters more than the number of people in one's network. Marriage and long-term partnerships have been studied extensively. Married people, on average, show better health outcomes than unmarried people, though this finding varies by gender and other factors. The health benefits of marriage likely reflect multiple mechanisms: economic resources, social support, health monitoring, and shared activities. Widowhood, particularly recent widowhood, is associated with increased health risks, suggesting that the loss of a partner has real physiological effects. Friendships and community connections also matter. People with active friend networks, participation in community groups, or regular contact with neighbors show better outcomes than those without such connections. These relationships may become increasingly important as family structures change and children live farther away. Loneliness, the subjective feeling of isolation, may be as important as objective social connection. People can live alone without feeling lonely, and people surrounded by others can feel profoundly alone. The subjective experience of loneliness correlates with physiological measures, including inflammation and stress hormone levels. Addressing loneliness may require not just increasing social contact, but improving the quality of that contact. For older adults, maintaining social connection often requires intentional effort. Retirement can reduce work-based social contacts. Children may live far away. Friends may move or die. Mobility limitations can make leaving home difficult. These barriers are real, but they can be addressed through various strategies: regular phone or video calls, participation in senior centers or community programs, volunteering, religious or spiritual communities, shared interest groups. The research on social connection and health does not prescribe any particular form of connection. It simply observes that humans, across cultures and throughout history, have thrived in community and struggled in isolation. Maintaining connection to others, in whatever form works for individual circumstances, appears to support health across multiple dimensions. Purpose and engagement. Reasons to continue. The concept of purpose in life has received increasing research attention in recent decades. Studies suggest that people who feel their lives have meaning and direction show better health outcomes than those who lack this sense. The relationship holds across various measures, including mortality, disability, and cognitive decline. Purpose is difficult to define precisely but easy to recognize and experience. It is the sense that one's activities matter, that one has reasons to get up in the morning, that one's existence makes a difference to someone or something. It can come from many sources: family relationships, work or volunteer activities, creative pursuits, spiritual practice, learning, service to others. The mechanisms linking purpose to health are likely multiple. Purpose may motivate behaviors that support health, such as staying physically active or managing medical conditions. It may buffer stress by providing perspective and meaning. It may stimulate cognitive engagement that supports brain health. It may simply make life worth living, which itself has physiological correlates. Research on retirement has explored how leaving work affects health. The findings are mixed, suggesting that the effects depend on circumstances. For some, retirement brings relief from stress and opportunity for new pursuits. For others, it brings loss of purpose, social connection, and structure. The difference may lie in what replaces work, not in retirement itself. Continuing to learn appears in many studies of healthy aging. Learning new skills, exploring new topics, engaging with novel ideas all stimulate the brain in ways that may support cognitive health. The learning does not need to be formal or academic. It can be learning to play an instrument, studying a language, taking up a new hobby, or simply reading about topics outside one's usual interests. Contributing to others emerges as a theme across studies of purpose. People who feel needed, who have roles that involve helping others, often report higher life satisfaction and better health. This can take many forms: caring for grandchildren, volunteering, mentoring, simply being available to friends and neighbors. The act of contributing shifts focus from oneself to others, which may itself be beneficial. The sources of purpose can and do change across the lifespan. What mattered at 40 may matter less at 70, and new sources of meaning may emerge. The capacity to adapt, to find new reasons for engagement, may be as important as any particular source of purpose. Flexibility in this domain allows purpose to persist even as circumstances change. Sleep and restoration. The night work of health. Sleep changes with age, and these changes affect health in ways that are increasingly understood. Older adults typically experience lighter sleep, more frequent awakenings, and less deep sleep than younger adults. Total sleep time may decrease slightly, though individual variation is substantial. The functions of sleep are multiple and essential. During sleep, the brain consolidates memories, clearing away unnecessary information and strengthening important connections. The glymphatic system, recently discovered, becomes more active during sleep, clearing metabolic waste products from brain tissue. Hormones are regulated. Tissues repair. The cardiovascular system rests and recovers. Poor sleep correlates with numerous health problems. Cardiovascular disease risk increases with chronic sleep disruption. Metabolic health suffers, with effects on blood sugar regulation and appetite hormones. Immune function may be compromised. Cognitive performance declines. Mood is affected. The cumulative effects of poor sleep extend throughout the body. Sleep disorders become more common with age. Sleep apnea, characterized by repeated pauses in breathing during sleep, affects a substantial portion of older adults, particularly those with excess weight. Restless leg syndrome can disrupt sleep onset and maintenance. Insomnia, whether difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, affects many older adults and can become chronic. The environment for sleep matters. Dark, quiet, cool rooms support sleep better than bright, noisy, warm spaces. Consistent sleep and wake times help regulate the body's internal clock. Exposure to natural light during the day, particularly morning light, helps maintain circadian rhythms. Reducing screen time before bed may help, as blue light can suppress melatonin production. Medical conditions and medications affect sleep. Pain can disrupt sleep. Frequent urination, common with age, can cause awakenings. Medications for various conditions may interfere with sleep architecture. Addressing these factors, when possible, can improve sleep quality. The relationship between sleep and other health behaviors is bidirectional. Physical activity improves sleep, and good sleep supports the energy for physical activity. Stress management improves sleep, and good sleep reduces stress. Nutrition affects sleep, and sleep affects food choices. These connections mean that improvements in any area can ripple through others. Cognitive health. Maintaining mental function. Cognitive aging has been studied extensively, and the findings offer both reassurance and guidance. Normal cognitive aging involves changes, but these changes are not the same as dementia. Understanding the difference matters for interpreting one's own experience. Processing speed typically declines with age. Tasks that require quick responses become more difficult. This slowing is normal and does not necessarily indicate any underlying pathology. It reflects changes in neural transmission that occur across the population. Working memory. The ability to hold and manipulate information temporarily may show some decline. Remembering a phone number long enough to dial it, or keeping track of several items while shopping, may become slightly more challenging. Long-term memory for events and knowledge is often well preserved. Vocabulary and accumulated knowledge, sometimes called crystallized intelligence, often remain stable or even improve with age. Older adults typically know more words, have more life experience to draw on, and may show better judgment in familiar domains. This wisdom of experience is a genuine cognitive asset. The concept of cognitive reserve helps explain why some people maintain function despite brain changes. Reserve refers to the brain's ability to compensate for damage or decline by using alternative pathways or strategies. People with more education, more complex occupations, and more intellectually engaged lives tend to have greater reserve. The brain that has been challenged throughout life appears better able to adapt when challenges arise. Activities that may support cognitive health are those that involve novelty, complexity, and engagement, learning new skills, exploring unfamiliar topics, solving problems, and engaging in rich social interactions all provide cognitive stimulation. The specific activity matters less than its demand on the brain to adapt and learn. Physical activity also supports cognitive health through multiple mechanisms. It increases blood flow to the brain. It stimulates the release of growth factors that support neural health. It may reduce inflammation. It improves cardiovascular health, which is itself linked to brain health. The relationship between physical and cognitive health is intimate and bidirectional. Social engagement appears protective. People with rich social lives show better cognitive outcomes on average. Conversation, collaboration, and social interaction all engage cognitive functions in ways that solitary activities may not. The social brain is exercised in social contexts. Managing cardiovascular risk factors supports brain health. Conditions that affect blood vessels, including hypertension, diabetes, and high cholesterol, also affect the brain's blood supply. What is good for the heart tends to be good for the brain. This connection means that cardiovascular health and cognitive health cannot be separated. Stress and adaptation. The physiology of challenge. Stress is not simply bad. It is a necessary part of life, a signal that something requires attention, a stimulus for adaptation. The question is not how to eliminate stress, but how to respond to it in ways that support rather than undermine health. The stress response evolved to handle acute challenges. When threatened, the body mobilizes resources. Heart rate increases. Blood pressure rises. Glucose is released. Attention sharpens. This response, sometimes called fight or flight, prepares the organism to deal with immediate danger. When the danger passes, the body returns to baseline. Problems arise when the stress response is activated chronically. Modern life presents few acute physical threats, but many ongoing psychological challenges. Work pressure, financial concerns, relationship difficulties, caregiving demands, all can trigger stress responses that never fully resolve. The body that remains in a state of high alert pays a price over time. Chronic stress affects multiple systems. The cardiovascular system works harder than it should. The immune system may become dysregulated, either overactive or suppressed. Metabolic processes shift, promoting fat storage and insulin resistance. Brain function may be affected, particularly memory and emotional regulation. The cumulative effect is accelerated wear and tear on multiple organs. The concept of allostatic load describes this cumulative burden. Each stress response leaves a trace, and over time, these traces add up. High allostatic load predicts worse health outcomes across multiple measures. Reducing allostatic load, or preventing its accumulation, becomes a health goal in itself. Recovery from stress matters as much as the stress itself. The ability to return to baseline after challenge, to let go of the activation and return to rest, protects against chronic strain. Practices that support recovery include physical activity, which can discharge stress energy, social connection, which provides comfort and perspective, and activities that engage attention in absorbing ways, providing a break from worry. Mindfulness and meditation have received research attention for their effects on stress. These practices appear to reduce activation of stress pathways and increase activation of restorative pathways. They can be learned and practiced by people of any age or ability. The evidence suggests benefits for both mental and physical health, though the size of effects varies across studies. The relationship between stress and aging is bidirectional. Stress accelerates biological aging through multiple mechanisms. At the same time, aging may reduce the body's capacity to handle stress, making the same challenges more costly. Breaking this cycle, or preventing its formation, supports healthier aging. Environment and exposure. The world around us. Health is shaped not only by what we do, but by where we are. The physical environment influences health through multiple pathways, some obvious and some subtle. Air quality affects respiratory and cardiovascular health. Particulate matter, ozone, and other pollutants have documented effects on mortality and morbidity. Older adults may be more vulnerable to these effects due to reduced physiological reserve. Living in areas with better air quality, or taking steps to reduce exposure when air quality is poor, supports health. Noise exposure affects sleep, stress, and cardiovascular health. Chronic noise, particularly at night, disrupts sleep and activates stress pathways. The effects accumulate over time. Quiet environments, or effective soundproofing, reduce this burden. Green space appears beneficial across multiple studies. Access to parks, gardens, and natural areas correlates with better health outcomes. The mechanisms likely include opportunities for physical activity, stress reduction, social interaction, and simply the psychological benefits of nature. Even views of green space from windows may confer some benefit. Indoor environments matter because most people spend most time indoors. Indoor air quality can be worse than outdoor air due to off-gassing from materials, mold, and inadequate ventilation. Temperature extremes affect comfort and health. Lighting affects mood and circadian rhythms. Attention to indoor environments supports daily well-being. The built environment shapes behavior in ways that affect health. Walkable neighborhoods encourage physical activity. Access to healthy food influences nutrition. Safe environments support outdoor activity. Social spaces facilitate connection. These features are not equally distributed, and their absence creates barriers to healthy living. Climate change introduces new environmental considerations. Rising temperatures, extreme weather events, and shifting disease patterns all affect health. Older adults may be particularly vulnerable to heat waves and other climate-related risks. Awareness of these risks and preparation for them become part of health protection. The environmental perspective reminds us that health is not solely individual. It is shaped by conditions that extend beyond personal control. While individuals can make choices within their environments, those environments themselves determine the range of choices available. This understanding neither excuses inaction nor guarantees outcomes. It simply acknowledges the full context in which aging occurs. The integration of approaches. The preceding sections have examined aging from multiple angles: biological, behavioral, social, environmental. Each perspective offers insights, but none tells the whole story. Health in later decades emerges from the interaction of all these factors. Consider how these elements combine in actual experience. Physical activity supports cardiovascular health, which supports brain health. Social connection provides motivation for activity and reduces stress, which supports both cardiovascular and brain health. Nutrition provides fuel for activity and raw materials for repair. Sleep consolidates learning and enables recovery. Purpose gives meaning to all of it, making the effort worthwhile. The interactions are as important as the individual factors. Someone who exercises but eats poorly may not achieve optimal outcomes. Someone with strong social connections but chronic sleep deprivation may still struggle. The systems are interconnected, and neglecting one can undermine others. This interconnectedness has practical implications. Improvements in any area can ripple through others. Better sleep increases energy for activity. More activity improves mood and social engagement. Social connection reduces stress, improving sleep. Small changes in one domain can trigger positive cascades through others. The same principle applies to challenges. Stress can disrupt sleep, reducing energy for activity, leading to social withdrawal, which increases stress. Negative cascades can develop as easily as positive ones. Recognizing these patterns allows intervention at multiple points. The goal is not perfection in any domain, but balance across them. Someone who exercises moderately, eats reasonably well, maintains social connections, manages stress adequately, and sleeps reasonably will likely do better than someone who excels in one area while neglecting others. The whole matters more than any part. The perspective of decades. Aging is not a problem to be solved. It is a process to be understood and, to some extent, influenced. The goal is not to live forever, which is impossible, but to live well for as long as life lasts. This distinction matters because it shifts focus from quantity to quality, from extension to experience. The research reviewed here offers no guarantees. Following all the recommendations does not ensure a long and healthy life. Genetics matter. Luck matters. Circumstances beyond control matter. The most disciplined person can still develop disease. The most careful person can still experience decline. This uncertainty is part of being human. What the research offers is not certainty, but probability. People who maintain physical activity are more likely to remain mobile. People who stay socially connected are more likely to remain engaged. People who manage stress are more likely to maintain health. These are tendencies, not guarantees. They describe what happens on average, not what will happen in any individual case. This probabilistic understanding is liberating in its way. It frees us from the burden of thinking we can control everything. It acknowledges that outcomes are not entirely within our power. It allows us to make choices based on likelihoods while accepting that the actual result may differ. The later decades of life offer opportunities that earlier decades did not. Time can be more flexible. Priorities can be clearer. Relationships can be deeper. Perspective can be broader. These possibilities exist alongside the challenges of aging. Both are real. Both deserve attention. How one navigates these years depends on many factors, including health, resources, temperament, and circumstances. There is no single right way. There are only individual paths, each with its own contours, each leading to its own destination. The research provides guidance for the journey, but cannot map it in advance. What remains is the simple fact of being alive, of having another day, of making choices about how to spend it. Those choices accumulate across decades, shaping the experience of aging in ways large and small. The body responds to what we ask of it. The mind responds to what we give it. The spirit responds to what we care about. This responsiveness is the fundamental fact of human biology, and it remains true at every age. The body you inhabit today is not the body you inhabited at 30 or 50. It has changed in countless ways, some visible, some hidden. But the fundamental truth remains. It responds to what you ask of it. The connection between mind and body is not a fixed inheritance that diminishes with time. It is a living relationship, sustained by attention, by presence, by the simple act of showing up for yourself day after day. The research gathered here, spanning decades and disciplines, points to a single conclusion worth carrying forward. How you live matters, not because it guarantees any particular outcome, but because it shapes the experience of whatever time you have. If this conversation stirred something worth reflecting on, we would be honored to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if the idea of building a personal library of health wisdom appeals to you, we invite you to explore other recordings in this collection and to subscribe so that new wisdom finds its way to you. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.